Today I'd like to continue our journey through the book of Numbers. We're at the point now where our Jewish brothers and sisters have arrived very close to the Promised Land, and they're involved in some skirmishes back and forth with different tribes to establish their superiority in the land. We've seen some attempts to kind of take the booty that they get from their various conquests. We've seen that in chapter 31. We notice that the clan and the commander gave an offering to the Lord from the food articles that they seize. So they seize some food, but very nicely they say, well, God is with us here and in our struggles, and let's give some to God as well. And that food offering was placed in the memorial tent as an offering. And the common soldiers, the everyday soldiers, they could keep the articles that they had looted for themselves. So the commanders are kind of setting an example. They're putting God first and giving their offerings to God, and then the regular soldiers, they keep it for themselves. It kind of helps with their family, feeding their family, helping their family. So, and also, of course, an incentive for them to keep on fighting in the battle. As we look at chapter 32 of the book of Numbers, the Reubenites and the Gadites ask for some grazing land, but Moses gets mad at them because he thought that they would not be engaging in the battles and that they would kind of separate themselves from the other Israelites, these two tribes. He thought that they would just kind of stay on their grazing land and just kind of hang out there and just let the other 10 tribes fight and just, well, we're not going to fight. We're happy here and we have these grazing lands and we have our livestock and we're just going to stay here. Because the land that they were eyeing was very good for grazing of their livestock. So what they do very smartly is they sit down and they come to a compromise. They can have their grazing land, Moses says, but they must also assist in the fighting. So it works out well. They're going to get the land, that's good for them, but at the same time, they'll be helping others in fighting the battles. So really a win-win for both sides here. They were given the land of Gilead for their families and flocks, and they rebuilt all of the towns and the sheepfolds. So they were very industrious in doing that. Sheepfolds very important to keep the sheep together so they didn't wander off, obviously. And they rebuilt the towns because the towns had been destroyed in the battles. We always see this with war. The difficulty is, yes, we can go in and we can win and we can destroy, but then how long does it take us to rebuild? And this is why we certainly try to avoid wars, and we say, gee, really, do wars make any sense in our day and age? Because we spend so much money on these weapons that could go for food, and then we're spending even more money on rebuilding all of the buildings and lands and homes and hospitals that the weapons have destroyed. So we say, does war make any sense? Isn't there a better way to solve our problems together? In chapter 33, the first part of this chapter gives a progression of the journey from Egypt. It starts with the Passover, and it names all the places where the Israelites camped. So it's kind of a reboot of their journey, goes through the various towns that they were in. Kind of nice to remember as they now are really on the cusp of entering into the Promised Land. Nice to remember where they've been, what they've been through, all their experiences. It's a retelling for them. It also includes the detail that Aaron was 123 years old when he died, and that it was during the 40th year of the journey from Egypt. He died on Mount Hor. So it talks about the death of Aaron. And again, when we see these huge ages, over 100. Sometimes in the Bible it goes up to 900. We are not really sure in terms of the accuracy, in terms of our own way of accounting, or how they accounted these years, and did they give more years to somebody who had a key role, obviously, like Aaron did. So, but Aaron lived a full life, is really what they're saying. But the Lord tells Moses then that the Israelites will cross the Jordan, and they'll go into the land of Canaan, and they will drive out all the inhabitants, destroy all their stone figures, their molten images, and their high places. So the Lord is reassuring Moses here that this will be successful, and they will go in, and as they go in, they should destroy all of these false gods, the images that they have of these gods and goddesses, because again, the relationship that God has with the Israelites is that He is their God, there is no other. And so all of these other gods and goddesses, the images, should be destroyed. We know from the ongoing history, of course, that that did not happen, that there was always this back and forth among the Israelites in terms of should they worship these other gods and goddesses. And so when we see this here, we can tend to think, well, that was an end to it. But the reality is, of course, it was not, that it was an ongoing struggle for the Israelites, as really it's an ongoing struggle for us today. We worship different gods. Sometimes it's the god of success. Sometimes it's the god of drugs, or different material things that kind of substitute for our understanding of God. Sometimes we want the bigger house. Sometimes we want the better car. This competitiveness that we can get into, and that can, of course, take the place of our relationship with God, because it becomes our priority and not our relationship with God. And that was the same for the Israelites as they went into the promised land, and as they lived with the Canaanites. They were so close to them, they got to know their gods and goddesses, and many times they would say, well, that's, why not, go over and worship that God and that goddess instead of worshiping the Lord. If they are not successful in driving out all the inhabitants of the land, they will become a thorn in the side of the Israelites. So this is the ongoing dilemma, because all of the Canaanites obviously were not wiped out, all of the gods and goddesses were not destroyed, and so there's this ongoing relationship that we're going to see between the Canaanites and the Israelites, the controversies back and forth, the battles, and the tendency for them to many times worship these gods and goddesses. In chapter 34, the Lord tells Moses the boundaries of the land that God will give to them. So we get a sense of the land and how big the land is going to be. And in our next video, we'll continue with chapter 34 and get a sense of the land. And what we take from this is the preciousness of the land, the importance of the land for the people, and the importance really of God and His promise. God has made this promise, and God has fulfilled the promise. God bless.